question.
All right, Big Papa. I am ready.
So what's your question, Spencer?
All right. So my question is, what is the origin of the Enneagram that is oh so popular these days? And yeah, what has it turned into that it wasn't?
So uh, that's an interesting question. There's the Enneagram symbol, and then there's the Enneagram knowledge that been laid on the symbol. Symbols ancient, but the first ideas of it, come from Greek philosophers, Pythagoras and Plotinus. Plotinus, in particular, wrote Enneads, and these are ideas of the higher mind, of transcendence into the higher minds. Um, and so the first person to introduce the Enneagram symbol to the West was a fellow named Gurdjieff. It was around the turn of the century. He was from Russia. Was it Georgia specific? I don't know. But one thing he did is that he took these ideas and he presented them as his own, which they weren't. Like I said, the ideas that he presented actually go back to Plotinus and Pythagoras, and uh, then there's the well-known seven rays of creation, et cetera, et cetera. He took these ideas and he basically failed to attribute where they came from, and his students took that after he died and ran with it. And what they came up with is, you see, he didn't have anything really new to say himself about it, but he didn't let his students know that he'd gotten it from somewhere else. In fact, there's a great movie that was done about called Meetings with Remarkable Men, if you ever get a chance to see it. And in the openings of the movie, it shows a young Gurdjieff taking uh, what is it? Something like a sparrow and painting it yellow and selling it to bourgeois women, to get money to buy books, philosophies, and ancient traditions, where he got his ideas from. So first of all, starts out showing there's a bit unethical side to him. There was that, and that he was getting ideas from other places that he never really told his students about. So they went on thinking, oh, this is all original and great stuff, and it wasn't. And he introduced nothing new. Now, specifically, what people call the Enneagram these days um, comes from Ichazo, um, the fellow that you and I have studied his trainings and his works with. And Ichazo is the one who came up with the Enneagrams of the ego. And this is where somebody who had studied with him briefly in Chile and didn't get all of the knowledge from Ichazo, but ran off with a small piece of it. And he was a psychologist, psychiatrist, and he had the idea that this was great knowledge, great information, and one thing he would do with that is he would present uh, outline, a model for personalities, for psychological personalities. And that's mainly where what most people think of the Enneagram came from. And they, the people that he lectured on after he left early before getting all of the information about the enneagrams of the egos from Chazo,
Do we have a name for this guy or
Claudio Naranjo. Okay, so it was Claudio Naranjo, and he lectured on it, and then his students ran off from there, and they also failed to attribute it to Oscar. Now, Claudio did attribute it to Oscar, to his credit. And later on, he and Oscar met, and he basically apologized to Oscar for the variations and things that he introduced that removed the Enneagram from its original purpose, which is to help with the attainment of pristine enlightenment. And so this is where a lot of the, excuse me a moment, can you pause? Hey, 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 you, okay. So Claudio Naranjo is the fellow who then went and lectured on it without having the complete picture of the enneagrams of the fixations. And he used them specifically to create a coda of personality disorders. Now, the reason he did that is that psychology lacks an underlying innate structure of mind. Modern psychology doesn't have that. How it came about is first Freud established the ideas, but with a lot of absurd ideas like penis envy, that women have penis envy. You ask women if they envy men's penises. They don't envy them. They might, some of them might say they desire them, but they don't envy them. So, anyways, and that came about because Freud apparently had some patients who were being molested by their fathers, and he refused to believe that their fathers were actually molesting them or had molested them. So he called it penis envy, which you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
see is,
Freud was an interesting guy. I
it
definitely
was an
take some of
interesting
his
guy.
concepts like with a
Yeah,
grain of salt.
but he gave one basic concept to the world that was really important, and that is psychology. The very idea of psychology as a science. And after that, um, people begin to realize, yeah, these ideas like penis envy are ridiculous. And they begin to look at it and say, well, we have to approach this scientifically, which means we need repeatable results. We need science. The whole term science really just means a method. And that's the method of testing and having repeatable results. That's all really science means. But if that's an important meaning. So they begin to observe patients, but they're observing patients who were mentally ill. So consequently, we have these ideas of, and eventually they came up with the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual for Personality Disorders. Now, everybody doesn't have a personality disorders, but we all have neuroses. And the neuroses we have are actually the fixations of the ego from the Enneagram. And Oscar mapped them out to the DSM-3R, um, which has 10 personality disorders. And he mapped out and said, these are the 9 of them. And in the DSM, 2 of the 10 are actually just the flip sides of the same one. And so he mapped them out. And the thing about the DSM is the number of personality disorders has grown, and now it's shrunk again. It's down to 5 or 6 now. I don't know, because all they're doing is they're observing behaviors, and then they're arguing this. The psychiatrists, psychologists are arguing among themselves about what is a personality disorder, because they don't have an underlying innate structure of mind to look at and say, well, look, this is where this disorder comes from, as Chazo had. And that's what Chazo presented, was an underlying uh, innate structure of mind. So that's very important. And modern psychology hasn't picked up on that yet because, well, you know, Chazo was a mystic, which actually you and I both know that he was actually quite a profound philosopher, and I mean a philosopher in the tradition of Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, and so on. Uh, and he really did understand that and present that and produce that. And the Enneagram is one of the very basic symbols and models that he used in mapping that out. Now, as you well know, there are 9 systems in the Eureka method, and so this 9 systems gives you the 9 categorized systems of your physiology, of your psyche and your body, your mind, and this is the beginning of the understanding of Enneagram knowledge. But what happened is many people ran off thinking, and they created myths saying, oh, this is ancient knowledge that came down from some mysterious Sufi sect that is in somewhere in the Pamir or somewhere like that, mysterious, and nobody knows who they are, but they exist, they must be real. and no, that's not where it came from. And so this is how this great misunderstanding that's really become a tsunami of misunderstanding around the world. You'll find Enneagram coaches and online tests, and at this point, it's just countless books on the Enneagram that are based off the misunderstandings that Claudio Naranjo took and lectured on and grew out of those. And like I said, Naranjo only had a piece of the knowledge and specifically altered it to fit in a psychological model. Being a psychiatrist, he needed that because, as I said, there's no underlying structure in psychology at the moment. It's all based on committees and observations and committees. Yeah, you got a
Did you find
question?
that he was successful in pairing up psychology with the Enneagram in any way?
Well, personality types is successful in the sense that it does establish the idea, as Freud established the very idea of psychology itself and made that an important field of study. He made it a field of study of the variations of personality. But here's a problem. And the problem becomes that every fixation, every ego fixation that Ichazo realized and
Ego
wrote and
fixations
lectured
being
about.
points on the Enneagrams. Just throwing that out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, points on the Enneagram. But the fixations of each one of those is actually a neuroses. And when the neuroses becomes more crystallized, more pronounced, it turns into a personality disorder, which Ichazo mapped to the DSM-3R, I said. And so Naranjo didn't really stress that these personality types are actually neuroses. And people think, and they look at this and they constantly think, oh, look, I'm a 9. Oh, look, I'm a 7, or I'm a 5. It's like, no, you're not. Your consciousness, your innate, perfect, pure consciousness is who you really are. And you have an ego and you have fixations. Also, what a lot of people did not get from is the fact that I have squirrels running outside my windows, is uh, that we have trifixations. He altered the idea and added to the idea of basic instincts. Now, Oscar established that there are 3 basic instincts, and an instinct is a mode of your psyche to persevere. as Oscar originally starts off what he called proto-analysis, the first analysis that gives us these answers, that shows us our trifixations, our ego, and how our mind is working, and how it's stuck in these mechanical ego thoughts, and constantly goes around and around in the same circle, that we all eventually at some point go, oh, why is my mind going around in the same things over and over again? The reason is because we have ego fixations, is because we have neuroses. And so Echazo established this, that we have three, one in each of the basic instincts, and the basic instincts are the way that a psyche survives. And he put it at the beginning of, he made a very concise statement at the beginning of his proto-analysis work, and that is, life has a tendency to seek to perpetuate itself. That's a simple statement, but if you really examine it closely, it's very precise and it's very profound. Life has the tendency to seek to perpetuate itself. And so the ways of perpetuation that we have is, we have three basic instinctual ways to do that. One is our physical well-being, as you well know, and this is centered in the gut. And this is, how am I doing? How am I thinking? The question that the psyche's always asking, that the instinct, the conservation instinct is always asking, is how am I? And if it stops asking that questions, it stopped asking it because you're literally dead. Or, as you
Sounds
well
like
know,
heaven.
as you well know, when your gut is in enough pain, you're sick and your gut's in enough pain, maybe it's coming out of both ends. As you well know, it's like, I wish I would just die and this would get over with.
As
You,
I well
you
know.
yes, you well know. We won't go into that one,
No.
but uh, this
I
is
got food
basic.
poisoning at Randy's house. It's my own thing. Yeah, and I was real sick, and he's living with that. I was calling my mom and I was crying and everything. It was a lot.
No, I think it was something that you ate before you came. Hey, normally it takes 12 to 24 hours before food poisoning sets in.
But
Um,
what I know is I was miserable.
that's what I understand. You were certainly miserable, but as we've all experienced at some point in our life, there's that sense of, I don't care to live any longer, and when you're in that much of a state. So you can see this is the conservation instinct. It's asking the question, how am I? And when the answer comes back, all I experience is pain. It wants the pain to end, and so that's the first basic instinct. The second one is, ask the question, who am I with? And that's the relations instinct. And the very basic function of this: are you a friend or are you a foe? If I don't feel that in my heart, I don't feel that you're a friend and that you've got it out for me, uh, and you have it out for me, and I don't feel that, I'm in trouble.
And I'm sure
So
there's tons of neuroticisms around that, or however
yes,
you call
so
it. Yeah.
this is one of the basic instincts. The third instinct is the adaptation instinct, thinking. It's why we evolved thinking, is so we can adapt. Human beings have managed to survive in every environment on the planet, including the deep oceans and going down in submersible submarines. But it's our rationality, our thoughts, and our understandings, and our ability to reason um, intellectually, that gives us the ability to adapt our environments. And in fact, you're sitting in a room right now with lights, curtains on the walls, but that place is probably heated in the winter and maybe cooled in the summer. Although you're up near Mount Hood right now, so I don't know if you need so much cooling in the summer. since it's generally cool up there. But anyways, you're living in a mini environment that through our adaptation instinct, we have managed to create our domiciles, our housing that creates a mini environment that's suitable to us to survive in. And this is what the adaptation instinct is for. And the problem with the adaptation instinct, obviously, is that our heads run off with us and it ignores our relations instinct and ignores our conservation instinct and just does whatever the hell it wants without paying attention to the other instincts. And this is the problem with the instincts, the ego and the instincts, is that each one of our instincts is placed in opposition to the other instincts by our ego. Um, and this creates a hell of a mess in our lives. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know who we're with. And we don't really know how we're doing. Um, because every instinct is arguing for itself rather than being unified and having this state of calm, peaceful happiness. That's the natural state of a human being when we transcend our egos. And this basic knowledge of trifixes and the instincts and so on has been basically corrupted in people that have gone out and now teach and lecture and write books, and they don't get this. One of the most common things right now is that on the Enneagram is that you have a fixation in each one of the three instincts. Well, some people get that. Some people just go, "I'm a seven, or I'm eight," but some people will say, "I am a 3, uh, 1, 6," for instance. They'll give a number like that and say, "Ah, this is my tri type." And the problem is that what actually happens in the mind is that it goes the other way around the Enneagram. We start off in a primary one of one of the 9 points. So we have a primary point that we start off in. Our mind always goes back to this primary point, and
Yeah, we
then
have the secondary and the
and the
tertiary
third.
is that
But
the
it's always when you look at the Enneagram symbol, it's always moving in a clockwise fashion. They're now presenting this in a counterclockwise fashion, which is not how the ego actually moves. And there's a
consequently.
reason why there's a clockwise and counterclockwise use of the Enneagram, and that is that trialectic logic. That's an important underpinning. Excuse me for a minute. Have a little coffee. Espresso Patronum.
We got to do a video on that.
Yeah, we should on how to make an espresso Patronum. That would be a good one. Anyways, so this clockwise and counterclockwise movements happens because trialectic logic says that any process can be ascending or descending. And Chazo famously used the example of water. You add energy to water, and eventually, all of a sudden, it's steam. It's boiling and it becomes steam. It becomes a vapor. But you take water and you take away energy, and eventually, at some point, it crystallizes and it's ice, and the states change. So it ascends or descends. Well, since ego is basically a descending process, the direction around the Enneagram of the ego and our ego, our fixated mechanical ego, is in a descending process, and so the direction around the Enneagram matters. So this popular trend now of recognizing that there is a trifixation of the ego, or the personality types, as they call it, but giving them in a reverse order entirely misses the point of what a fixation is. Now, people say, "Oh, well, I'm not talking about fixation. I'm talking about my personality." Well, your personality, as I noted, is actually a matter of neuroses. all human beings, in essence, are the same. We're identical. So, what makes us different in our personalities, my personality and your personality, is our ego processes and some other um, physiological things go into that. But this point is really important. And so, seeing these misunderstandings and myths, and I'm talking about this goes across the world. I mean, Turkey, France, Japan, China, Indonesia. Enneagram has become quite popular, and people are writing books and propounding on it without having the basic underlying understanding that you get when you follow the Eureka path and you understand, you're given the knowledge to understand the real underlying foundations of these things. They don't have that. So they're basically taking this idea of personality types based on this nine, and they're coming up with all sorts of variations. Now they're saying there's a sexual nine, or a self-preservation nine, and there's one other one, SPSOSX. Another abbreviations for these three variations they have on each individual fixation, and these are absurd ideas. You don't have a sexual nine. Everybody has sex. Everybody has a sexual life, a sexual component in their psyche outside of your ego fixation. Um, and so these are some absurd ideas that they're trying to get without having the underlying foundation. Now, for instance, you and I know there are three instincts. We also know there are four functions and two poles. And the two poles are sex and spiritual. And it's very common in spiritual traditions to find a work with sexual energy, turning sexual energy into spiritual energy.
And so then, and then also the poles, the way that I've recognized them is just to like c- uh commit to some form of immortality. Yes. So then spiritual
Well,
and
they're the instincts are drives for preservation, um, to continue life, and the sexual poles are drives. Well, the sexual and the spiritual poles are drives for immortality, to achieve immortality, to persevere, but persevere for eternity. Through sex, it's to persevere through children. It's a physical perseverance. In the spiritual sense, it's a sense that our spirit, our essence, to find the immortal side of our spiritual essence. Um, and so these are the two drives that drive us. So that the people now working with the Enneagram don't understand that. Um,
I have so many questions. So I think it's great that I think
well,
that's a great
ask,
thing. No,
ask,
absolutely. But we have about 6 minutes left, and I'll
ask
consider those
one.
questions. I'll consider those questions. But I think what would be really nice is if we kind of recapped. Okay, so the Enneagram, right? So just kind of briefly, where it came from, what's conflated about it now, and I wanted to ask. So the Enneagram helps us to understand how does it promote enlightenment? Is it just through self-awareness or is it something else?
No, no, it promotes it through the lights, and that's a whole other
Of course.
whole other discussion we can have is about the lights of the mind, that the mind actually produces light,
And that's a
and
question I really wanted to know because I don't
we
even
actually
I don't
see
know
it.
that.
We actually see it. Well, let's do another interview on that, and we'll talk about the lights. Um, that's very important in the ascension into that. Remember, there are 9 colors in each point of the Enneagram.
Right.
And these are colors that you actually, when you learn, you become initiated, you actually learn to see them because your mind actually produces them, literally produces the light, and you actually see it.
Like Violet being like divine love or something. Am I on the right path with that or
Sort of, yes.
sort of? Okay.
I wouldn't disagree with
I'll take it. I'll take it.
that. But this is a whole nother discussion we can have is about the lights. But right now, it's enough to see how did the Enneagram get to be so widespread and such misunderstanding.
Do we find that these misunderstandings, do we find that maybe they're still helpful
No,
or
no. Here's
generally?
here's here's the problem: is that the way that they're presented is they produce an identification with your ego. And you cannot transcend into the state of enlightenment if you keep identifying with your ego. As long as you're identifying with your mechanical ego, you literally cannot transcend into the state of enlightenment. So, in that sense, they all produce this, and a number of people will say, "Well, I know that I'm not my ego," and said, but then they'll go on and they'll keep saying, "I am this, I am that,"
Sounds like
and
me.
yeah, it sounds like all of us in our egos. That's what ego's about, is identifying with everything but our true selves.
Sounds like a good time.
Not really. Think of all the shit you've been through recently that wasn't fun. That was your ego.
Well, let's not do that. I can't handle that.
I think we covered it today for this particular topic.
Fantastic. Well, if you have anything else left to say, but uh, if you want to go into your background, the background that you have, the circle thing.
The circle thing. Oh,
Yes.
that was a yantra that I made. It was inspired by working with Eureka yantras. Um, and here, if I do this, and you see it. Whoops, what's the camera? There we go. It was designed that if you stare at the center of it for about 20, 30 seconds and then close your eyes, you'll see some colors. You'll see some colors of your mind. And this particular one will produce what I call a golden sun, or yeah, I'm not sure just I call it a golden sun because everybody sees the same thing when you do it. You just stare at the center of that. Although this is supposed to be a perfect square, not a rectangle, because of the of zoom. Um, but yes, you stare at it and then close your eyes after about 20 to 30 seconds, and you will see an after image. Right. And that after image is important for what it produces and what it says to you on a non-verbal, non-conceptual level. This is the idea of yantras. And as you well know, the Eureka School has a great many of them for very specific purposes of advancing your understanding and transcending into the state of enlightenment.
Which is better than drugs.
Yeah, I don't want to drink alcohol or take drugs, even hallucinogenics anymore in my life. I just don't like being stoned. I prefer my ordinary, normal state of mind, whatever that is. uh, and I don't mean whatever that is. I mean because I tend to be happy, and when I'm on drugs, I tend to just be stoned.
Fair. All
That,
right. Well,
that's that's
we've got
taken
probably
many.
10 seconds left. So
Yeah, well, it's taken many years to get there. So,
cool. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Randy. Blah, 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 blah.
thank you too, Spencer.
Absolutely.